We welcome you to another edition of Snap the Pigskin. Good afternoon. My name is Kedrick Stumbris. I cover the Wisconsin Badgers for Athlon Sports. Joining me today is Krissy Birdsall stepping in for Noah Clark. Krissy, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I believe I was on last season with Noah and Sam. Noah and I know each other from student radio back in the day, and it was a lot of fun. I helped make the new beautiful logo that's up in the corner, and yeah, it's nice to be back, especially in season now where we can actually talk some football.
Yeah, an excellent time to have you, Krissy, doing excellent work at the University of Wisconsin Student Radio Station. Of course, also sideline reporter for Big Ten Network or calling games herself. You like me are a little bit around every program in the Wisconsin Badgers athletic department. Um, Football, soccer, volleyball, a little bit of everywhere. You love to see it.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I think if you name it, I've probably covered it in one way or another.
Well, let's start with one of the things that you I know you have covered a little bit over this summer, interning at SNY, and that would be the New York Jets, which, to the surprise of many, not I, is a disaster class. The New York Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh. I can only imagine Aaron Rodgers fans standing around in a hot dog suit saying we're trying to find the person who did this. Um, the Saleh firing really is all you could ask for out of a New York sports story. I can imagine. The defense on that team is not the problem. So let's fire the defensive-minded head coach. Krissy, what are your first thoughts when you saw this news break yesterday on Tuesday the 8th?
I think my initial reactions were pretty similar to what a lot of people in New York thought. I mean, with Robert Saleh, you look at his record over the last few years being on the Jets. Okay, it's not the best. You kind of knew that maybe something would happen if they weren't able to take this team to the playoffs. They had Super Bowl aspirations. But the issue of this team, kind of you alluded to, was not the defense and Robert Saleh being a defensive minded coach. And to do it so early in the season, that's the shocking factor of the timing of it and just the reasonings why behind it, because he wasn't the true problem of this team. The problem has been the offense. It's been the entire season, which has led them to not get off to the start that they were hoping for. So to go ahead and fire your head coach 5 games into the season at this point is pretty crazy, but it's going to be interesting to see now how do they respond to this firing and how Jeff Ulbrich is going to try and take this team to a new level. I know that there's been a lot of internal talks right now of what that coaching carousel is going to look like, especially in that organization.
Well, I have no idea what's. I am kind of done predicting what that organization is going to do afterwards. What I am really interested in is seeing what happens with Robert Saleh after this year, and if he seemingly has to bear any responsibility really for what has happened in New York. I know there is always chatter about the San Francisco 49ers and him going back to that tree, working with Kyle Shanahan. I know they have just hired a new defensive coordinator this year. But it would be very curious to see that. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get another head coaching job, though. I would be very curious to see if he would be willing to step into Jacksonville, who, of course, Doug Peterson is not long for this world down there, I don't think. Or even what happens with Brian Daboll on the other side of the building at MetLife. I can only imagine. Do you have thoughts on what might happen next with Robert Saleh?
It's going to be really interesting. I think he's going to get picked up somewhere. He's going to get picked up somewhere in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. I see him kind of stepping more into a coordinator role for the moment. I think as a head coach, I think he's kind of have to sit back a little bit before he can jump into a new seat. But it's also going to be very dependent on what other head coaches you get fired. You mentioned Jacksonville. You mentioned the Giants also being a possibility. I think Jacksonville would be more likely of a landing spot for him than the New York Giants. I just don't see them firing Daboll with the roster that they have. I think their problems are bigger than what Brian Daboll is right now. Jacksonville could be an option, but I think a defensive coordinator position, wherever that opens up, depending on, what happens over the next couple of months here in the NFL. I'm not sure. Could it be Dallas? Could it be Green Bay, I know they have some movement over there. Could it be San Francisco? I could see Philadelphia if they have problems too, maybe going through another carousel and picking him up. So there's a lot of options for Robert Saleh. I don't think he's leaving the NFL anytime soon, but
No.
I don't think he'll be coming back as a head coach, not in the next year at least.
Completely agree in terms of there's going to be lots of opportunities for him. We also saw Aaron Rodgers today went on a television program and said that he did speak with Jets ownership yesterday before the news came out, and they just checked in on him. Aaron Rodgers made no mention of him potentially being asked about what he thought of Robert Saleh. Krissy, do you believe Aaron Rodgers in anything like that comes out of his mouth?
I mean, given his track record at Green Bay and kind of what we're already seeing in New York, it is very hard to believe him. Unfortunately, you have to take him at his word for it, but he is the greatest undercover GM that we've ever seen. I mean, without ever having the role, he's probably done more as a backdoor general manager than half of the general managers in the league right now, because he has something about getting coaches hired and fired. I mean, he's been able to get what he's wanted since day one, and that's going all the way back to Green Bay. I mean, we saw it with McCarthy, then we saw it with Hackett coming to New York, and now with Saleh. So, do I believe him? No, but I'm going to have to take his word for it. And until we hear otherwise, unfortunately, my thoughts just going to be my thoughts. But yeah, you have to believe him, even if you don't really want to.
Maybe you're more professional than I, but I think Aaron Rodgers lost all credibility to be taken at his word when his word was immunized, and he thought that meant something different than what it did. I think we also have a responsibility as human beings to call out the track record of certain individuals. And look, I think it is very curious, and at this point, it is just speculation, and maybe irresponsibly so. That the other report via CBS was that Saleh had been considering firing Nathaniel Hackett in that morning, and of course, Robert Saleh had his own job pulled before he had the opportunity to make that decision. Whether or not that came with an Aaron Rodgers blessing or the other, I don't think anybody is really of the ability to say or to judge. When Aaron Rodgers goes dancing around certain topics, though, I think there's a lot between the lines that is very easy to figure out these days. Let's move on, move forward, though. After climbing out of being 0 in Tombstone, here we are at second down. The Baltimore Ravens are flying once again, 3-2, and look as dangerous as any team in the league, quite frankly. They gutted out a just electric victory in overtime over the Cincinnati Bengals. I thought probably the most exciting game of the weekend. And look, if they don't take a very weird loss to the Raiders, and they do not lose by a toenail to open the season against the Kansas City Chiefs, we're potentially looking at a 4-1, 5-0 Baltimore Ravens team, and a quarterback in Lamar Jackson, who is once again a bona fide MVP contender. Krissy, what have you seen that you have liked out of the Baltimore Ravens so far this year?
I think the one thing that surprises me is that people doubted this team when they were 0-2. I mean, that whole
Mhm.
NFC North, we knew it was going to be a gauntlet going into the season, but everybody was so worried about the Ravens. Oh, they started out 0-2. Oh no, what's wrong with this team? Like, you have to trust the process, especially, with some of the key players they brought in. They brought in a running back, and Lamar Jackson has not had a running back in his career at Baltimore. So that's going to be a new element for him. Like, hey,
Mhm.
I don't have to run the ball 30 times a game. I can actually pass it and let somebody else take the hits for me. So I'm not I wasn't surprised by the 0-2 start. I mean, we talked about that Kansas City game. It was literally by a toenail that they lost that game. And then the Las Vegas Raiders, they're a fun team. It's Las Vegas. You never know what's going to happen there, but they've seemed to kind of start to put it together now. And going on that 3-0 stretch, they take on the Commanders, which could be another frisky team. You never know what's going on with them up there in Washington. And obviously that close quartered battle there, even though they're in different divisions, can always be a little interesting. But I don't feel concerned about this team, especially in the regular season. They've proved time and time again that they can win football games. It's going to be, once December, January comes for this team, what that's going to look like. But right now, I feel very confident in this team. They're a very complete team on both sides of the ball. And they've made the improvements where they needed to make the improvements, i.e., the running back position. And Derrick Henry Henry has been a beast so far. Just watching him in some of the
Mhm.
games, just being able to kind of go out there and do his thing where people were like, is he a little bit older? Is he a little bit washed now? And he just went out there and he just ran everybody down. So I'm excited to watch this team. I'm excited to watch the rest of that division because that's going to be a very interesting division to watch this year.
Yeah, Baltimore and Derrick Henry have seemingly found the fountain of youth for him. I think another reason we saw them maybe get off to a slow start is that there is no playbook for your offensive line coach unexpectedly passing away in August. On top of the fact that you had to replace 3 starters in that unit, it didn't look good week 1. Lamar Jackson was running for his life. Despite that performance, Lamar Jackson has the lowest sack rate of any starting quarterback in the league so far, according to Pro Football Reference, and the only quarterback with a lower interception percentage right now than Lamar Jackson is Josh Allen. And that's because Josh Allen has not thrown a pick yet this year. In terms of having a complete roster, I do think you probably want to see a little bit more from their defensive backs this year. They've lost some pieces there off of last year when that defense ranked first by DVOA. But for all the hemming and hawing you could do about the defensive backs in the first 5 weeks of the season, they have played Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. So I don't know how much you can totally discredit them for their performance, including, winning a couple of those games. So it's been a complete bounce back for the Ravens. And 0-2 is not the same 0-2 as it was before you added the 17th game, before you added the third wild card. It's going to be a great year, and like you said, the AFC North is going to be really competitive. And I want to switch gears to that team that they beat in that overtime thriller, and that's talking about on third down the Bengals, Browns, Patriots, Jags, Panthers, Titans, Rams all sit with the league worst 1-4 record. To me, the Bengals are one of these most surprising teams, and we'll get to them. But Krissy, who on this list is most surprising to you to see struggling so much early on?
All right, I kind of want to go through this team by team because I
Yeah,
feel like every team here has very interesting cases. We'll start kind of back rows. We'll start with the Rams. I feel like 1-4 is not indicative of what this team can be because of the injuries that they've had. I mean,
yeah.
everybody and their mother on that team is injured at this point.
And it started week 1. Like they had problems going into the season, and then week 1 comes around, and just everybody else who was otherwise healthy like just fell flat. And somehow Matt Stafford made that week 1 game competitive and got that to overtime. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I'm like, I wonder if they got cursed after winning the Super Bowl. Like, I don't know what kind of deal the front office had made to get that Super Bowl win, but it feels like ever since then they just cannot get healthy. It's the offensive line, half of their team's out. Now you have both your top receivers out, Matthew Stafford having injuries over the year. So I'm not super worried about the Rams. It's surprising in the sense like, man, they got injured again this early, but I'm not like, "Oh my gosh, like, the world is ending for the Rams." They're a talented team. They just need to I don't know, they need, like, a better strength and conditioning program. That's, maybe
They
the one thing that they could work on.
they were shaky and questionable on defense coming into the league or coming into the season. For me, they replaced a good amount of starters. I think they replaced 9 defensive starters on a defense that wasn't that good last year, 22nd in DVOA, and where it was 31st in Pro Football Focus's coverage grade last season. So like there were reasons to think maybe replacing a bunch of starters would be a good thing. But one of those starters you were replacing, of course, was Aaron Donald, and they've been even worse this year on that side of the ball than you'd expect. They're not good at stopping teams from passing the ball. They're not good at stopping teams from running the ball. I do think they got a little unlucky in their loss to the Packers on Sunday. I think the Packers kind of got away with one, but yeah, it's tough go for the Rams.
Yeah, just feels like a little bit of unlucky and obviously, that talent deficit from what they were a few years ago. I wanna talk about the Titans now a little bit. I didn't expect this team to be any good going into the season when you have Will Levis as your quarterback. I mean, people loved him going into the draft. I'm pretty sure Noah was actually one of those people, I think, who liked him because you
Mm.
see these, how he was able to pass in practice, but in games, they just never really saw it. And yeah, he's been a interesting case over there. He's made a lot of good
I
memes, though.
Yeah, that's true. And I always thought that they had surrounded him with enough pieces on offense, some exciting wide receiver talent. You bring in the name is escaping me, the former Dallas Cowboys running back.
Pollard.
Thank you, Tony Pollard. They bring in Tony Pollard. I thought that if Will Levis was anything, this would be the season where we would see it. I had certainly had questions of the defensive side of the ball, but yeah, I just don't think Will Levis is anything. I think I'm right there with you.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk about the Panthers here for a minute. I'm surprised they are 1-4. I thought they'd be 0-5. Um, that team. Oh my gosh. I mean, shout out Andy Dalton. That's all I gotta say is
hmm
he's came in there. He's balled out in the couple of games that we've already seen him. I picked him up in one of my fantasy leagues because I was like, he's the truth.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing he isn't, if not a stat merchant. I think it's something like he's quickly approaching the top 12 in like all kinds of passing categories, and then you see the engagement bait. That's like, is this a Hall of Fame resume? And it's like, well, no, like maybe fantasy football Hall of Fame resume, sure, but not pro football Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I'm just surprised that they've been able to win one game. I thought that was going to be the worst team in the league. I feel like now we have a more of a basement battle for that number one overall pick. I still think the
Yeah.
Panthers are the worst team, but hey, if Andy Dalton is the truth, I mean, I'm not complaining. Now he's on my fantasy team. I'm gonna skip
hmm
the Jaguars and I'm gonna go to the Patriots. Kind of a similar situation. They just made a change at quarterback, so it's gonna be interesting to see what you get from Drake May.
hmm
I Same thing with this team. I feel like they've taken a talent dip over the last couple of years. Once you lost Belichick, a lot of those, star players also started leaving with them. You had Jacoby Brissett as your starting quarterback the first couple of weeks, and now you got Drake May. So it's going to be interesting to see about that team. But I feel like 1-4 is not like shocking for them. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I expected much from this team this year, but I mean, maybe just a little bit more. Maybe would have expected a little bit more out of Jacoby, but yeah, it's a team that's replacing a whole lot of pieces. I don't think that new coaching staff is in over its head by any means. I think they just have a tough hill to climb. I think it's going to be hard, and this week should be a good time to figure out a little bit what they have in store with Drake May, and that's going to be kind of appointment television for me. I want to sit around and watch what Drake May can do, even if it's for a quarter.
Yeah, see what happens with him. I mean, they have a little bit of soul searching to do, but you got a young quarterback. Hey, at this point, you're 1-4. How much do you have to lose? Cleveland Browns. I'm going to say this is my second most surprising team, but I'm also not angry about it because I have so much anger and resentment towards the Cleveland Browns. No offense to anybody in Cleveland, Ohio. I don't like your decision that you made to pay Deshaun Watson, and you are getting the karma that you deserve. No offense.
You're not wrong. I have a rule when it comes to quarterback contracts, which is that if your quarterback is any good at all, your deal looks like a bargain by the end of it every single time, just because of the way the cap goes up. So the salary cap always goes up in the National Football League, and you basically can't overpay a good quarterback. It's not possible with the amount of cap dancing that you can do, and filling in bonuses in void years. Your deal looks better and better over time, basically no matter what. The deal for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, it looked like an absolute bargain. Part of that's because the COVID weirdness around the salary cap and how that math ended up working. All of that is to say, there is one giant caveat, and it is the Cleveland Browns contract to Deshaun Watson, which, like, human reasons aside, although the human reasons are first and foremost, they have made just a disaster deal with Deshaun that they cannot get out of. If they are to cut him any year, it's like a $200 million dead cap hit. It's just not possible. They would not be able to field a roster if they were to cut him. It's absurd.
Yeah, and I think honestly, the one thing that surprises me more about this team is not how bad the offense is; it's how bad the defense has been. They're supposed to be one of the top 10 offense or top 10 defenses this year, and
Mhm.
I mean, you give up 34 points to Washington. I mean, nothing against Washington. Jaden Daniels is definitely playing up his speed, but like they played teams that are not good this year. They lost to Raiders. They lost to New York. I mean, the Cowboys killed them, and I think the Cowboys, being that my team, I think they'll be a 500 team this year, and they just haven't looked good defensively in any of those games.
No, the Cowboys had their way with them with week 1, and it hasn't looked much better ever since. They kept that core together of Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, but otherwise, this is not the team that was second in the league in defensive DVOA last year. It's been incredible how much that team has fallen off of a cliff. I have no idea what's going on there. Let's shift gears to the other AFC North team that's on the list here, and that is the Bengals, which to me I think is maybe most surprising. And it goes with, my God, Joe Burrow has no help whatsoever from that defense. It is just an absolutely abysmal unit altogether. Joe Burrow has the most touchdown passes in the league with 12. Only 5 starting quarterbacks have a lower interception rate than Joe Burrow does. Against the Commanders, Joe Burrow threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and loss. Voodoo magic kept the Chiefs from losing again, as it always does, even though Patrick Mahomes is dead last in the league in air yards per attempt. Patrick Mahomes passed for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks in that game, and Cincinnati got walked off. That defense is horrible. And like, I can't believe how much that Cincinnati Bengals Super Bowl appearance is going to look like the greatest aberrational blip in the last 20 years.
I might have a few teams that would be a little bit more crazy, but I feel like with the Bengals, you kind of mentioned it. You feel for Joe Burrow. You're like, the first couple of years, he has no offensive line. He's running for his life every play. He's getting injured. And then now they beef up that offensive line. He still has a great receiver core, running backs or whatever. And the defense is just terrible. And you're like, they are wasting a generational talent with Joe Burrow because of that defense. The only thing that's keeping me for them being the most surprising team is because I feel like this is a typical thing for Cincinnati, and maybe this is just like a recency bias, but they're the opposite of Maryland football, where Maryland has like a great September and then doesn't do anything the rest of the year. The Bengals are the opposite. They have like their worst season in September, and then October 1st happens and they're like, wow, we just figured it out and everything's good, smooth sailing. Burrow had this, Burrow had that. And that's my only thing that's keeping me like from being super shocked from this team, because I just feel like it happens every year.
Yeah. He passed for 392 yards, 5 touchdowns, only 1 pick, and lost to the Baltimore Ravens.
Yep.
400 yards, damn near, and lost. It's unfortunate. Cameron DeSilva of Rams Wire wrote this week that if you go back to 1970, 253 teams have opened a season at 1-4. Only 15 of those ended up making the postseason. The last team being Washington in 2020. And that was the first year the playoffs expanded to 14 teams. So, of course, in the 14-team playoff era, the numbers are much more on your side than it was beforehand. But barring something drastic, all of these teams, the Bengals included, and the Rams included, who I thought were real sneaky NFC West team, are dead in the water.
Yeah, these teams are interesting. I mean, I would say like the Rams and the Bengals are probably the most, like, could say like in preseason, I picked those 2 teams to make the playoffs. Maybe not as much Rams, Bengals definitely. But I do want to touch on the Jaguars because I did skip them for a reason. That's because they're my most surprising team. Kedrick, maybe you might be able to explain this to me. What is wrong with this team? I feel like last year they were decent. I mean, you look at the league they're in. I mean, without Houston, playing really great all of a sudden, I don't feel like their division is super strong with the other teams that are in there. And it just feels like this team cannot figure it out. I mean, you thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be this generational talent. They thought that's maybe who Joe Burrow could be. Like, that's who Trevor Lawrence could be, is like Joe Burrow. And it just can't figure this team out, why they cannot seem to get over their own heads.
They haven't been able to get out of their own way since Thanksgiving of 2023. Since then, after they beat the Texans by a field goal, they ended the season 1-5, including a loss to the Tennessee Titans, in which Tennessee was playing for nothing, and the Jags had a playoff spot on the line with a win. and they have just continued to fall apart since then. It's starting 1-4 now since Thanksgiving of last year. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 2-9. Um, unbelievable. That defense has no talent. I was concerned going into the season with the skill talent that surrounded Trevor Lawrence. He didn't have top tier pass catching talent, but by any means, of course they lost some, but I did have some faith in tight end Evan Ingram. And I liked that they brought in the new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, and some of that emphasis on man coverage, and thought they were going to have to figure out, what they were going to do with some of these new defensive backs. But they had a lot of veterans in the room. They had Tyson Campbell, who I was a big fan of going into the year, and it's just they haven't been good at anything in particular. The worst team in the league on the defensive side by DVOA. It's sad. Maybe they'll get right against the Chicago Bears this week.
Yeah, I think that's almost a must-win game for them because one, they're playing in London, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's like their second home stadium. They're like the one team that plays there every single year. Two, I think that in the same how we were talking about Robert Saleh, I think that Doug Peterson, it's a must-win game for him because you're looking at this team and you're thinking that this is a team that, I mean, outside of maybe Houston, that should, 2 years ago was easily a playoff team. And then, Houston comes along and makes it a little more difficult. But with the rest of that division, I feel like there's still a really good chance that they could come in as that 6th or 7th seed. And they just can't seem to figure it out. And I think a lot of people now are starting to look at the coaching staff and saying, like, hey, what is going on here? You guys need to figure it out. So I would expect that this London game is a must-win game. And if they don't come away with that win, we might see a similar situation in New York where, the head coach doesn't make it back.
Yeah, completely agree. In terms of that must win, I got a good nugget later in the show for that one. I got a good nugget there. I'll make sure to bring it up. Let's move on to 4th down though. The longest day in NFL history finally ended early Monday morning when Dak Prescott orchestrates a game-winning drive to defeat the Pittsburgh, Wisconsin Badgers Steelers. So many former Badgers on that team. Krissy, I am really glad to talk to you, a Dallas Cowboys fan, about this team because this offseason, Noah and I talked a lot about what Dallas was going to do. The 3 big pieces that they need to pay, they have paid 2, and I think makes their picture for the future a little bit more clear. I know you alluded to, you think this is a 500-ish team this season. Tell me, what do you like about the Cowboys so far this season? What have you wanted to see more of them do?
What have I liked about the Cowboys? I can tell you a million things that I don't like about the Cowboys right now, and that's coming from a fan's perspective. But I think Dak Prescott. I am actually like one of those people who is a Dak Prescott fan. Surprisingly,
Okay.
I think a lot of people
That is a
just
breath of
don't.
fresh air.
Yeah, I know Noah gives me a lot of slack for it. A lot of the people at WSM give me slack for it, but I think that a lot of the things that Dak Prescott gets hated on, his playoff record, sometimes with the picks and stuff, you can make an argument with a lot of different quarterbacks, including Lamar Jackson. I think that the conversation that surrounds Dak in the playoffs is the exact same conversation that needs to happen around Lamar Jackson. And outside of last year, that was never the conversation. But I think that he's playing really well. You have to think about what's been around him. There's no running backs. I'm just gonna say it straight up. There's no running backs.
Nobody. And I thought in week 1, Mike McCarthy had been dialing up a lot of these really nice, like behind the line of scrimmage passes for Dak Prescott to kind of create a simulated run game. And we just haven't seen as much of that the rest of the way too. The lack of running back is really, really rough for that team.
And then you look at the other skill position, the receivers, you have CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and that's kind of it. I mean, Brandon Cooks is a good receiver, but he's getting a little bit up there in age. Tolbert is probably your wide receiver 3 at this point, and he's not going to be a guy long term. There's a lot of holes in this team. So the fact that they are playing as good as they are, which is not saying much, 3-2,
Yeah.
is surprising to me, just because I think that a lot of people thought this team was going to be good, and I didn't see it just because I didn't think the talent was there. I think the offensive line is doing really well.
Hmm.
They're holding up. That's always been a strong suit of this team. And
Hmm.
defensively, their secondary will be good. Just some injuries right now are preventing that from being a full fledged unit from what you can see. But yeah, I think those are the three bright spots of the team. I would say is Dak, the offensive line, and when the secondary gets healthy, it should be interesting.
Yeah. That Pittsburgh defense they had to play this past week is a really, really, really good unit. I know some people kind of probably want to bag on Dak for not winning bigger this past week, but with 4:56 left on the clock, he orchestrates a 15 play, 70-yard touchdown drive with only 20 seconds left to win by 3. It's not a perfect Cowboys team, but they're doing stuff. I want to ask you about Mike McCarthy and him as a play caller. Because when I watch Mike McCarthy now, and I was a big defender of him going into the offseason, I thought he did enough to deserve his job. I thought that Dak Prescott, who performed at an MVP caliber level for most of last season, a lot of that I think you can chalk up to Mike McCarthy and the wide open offense that he runs. However, there has been no evolution to the Mike McCarthy scheme that I can see. When I watch Dallas Cowboys football, I feel like I am trapped watching the Packers in the early 2010s. And that's crazy to me. What do you think about Mike McCarthy as a head coach thus far, and what his ultimate fate will be? Because is this a contract year for him? Is that correct too?
I think it's this year or next year. I'd have to look that
Yeah,
up.
it's one of the two, but either way, it's coming up quickly, and I think it might make that decision a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think I personally wasn't a huge fan of the hire initially. I mean, I know, his out at Green Bay wasn't like the best scenario, but I didn't know how he could really like change that offense into becoming a team that was going to be like next level, Super Bowl winning
Mhm.
caliber type of thing. I knew they had to get rid of Jason Garrett as much as I love Jason Garrett. He just wasn't going to take that team to the next level. And I didn't feel like Mike McCarthy was the step up that it needed to be. My issue with Mike McCarthy is not the style of play calling necessarily. It's the game clock management I have more issues
Mm.
with sometimes. There's just so many games where I'm sitting downstairs in my Jake Ferguson jersey and it's a close, tight knit game like the Steelers. And you're like, call a timeout. We need time. And he just doesn't. And you're just scratching your head, or he'll call like the randomest timeout for no reason. And like the play looks fine and everything. And he's like, no, I need to relook at this.
That I can
And
definitely relate to
that's
watching him for however many years in Green Bay, is the random, "This doesn't feel necessary" timeout. And it was always weird trying to figure out if that's Aaron Rodgers or Mike McCarthy.
Yeah. I think after, probably when he was in Green Bay, you could make that argument. But now that I've seen it across two different teams, I think I know what the common
Yeah,
denominator is at this
yeah.
point. And that's the issue that I have. I feel like, though, with this year, depending on what their record is, I don't know if it's going to be big enough that they're going to get rid of him, because the other question is who do you pick up at this point? I don't think they would pick up Robert Saleh. No offense. I don't think they would pick up a Doug Peterson if he gets let go. I don't think they would pick up a Vrabel either. I don't think that
Mm.
Vrabel really fits into that Cowboys way totally, at least, on both sides of the ball. I think Vrabel would be a good coordinator for this team, but yeah, I don't think he would be the head coaching candidate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Mike McCarthy. I think that with the talent that they have, they're doing as good of a job that they can. This
Mm.
defense is the big thing that needs to step up for this team if they want to have a successful season and maybe a chance of making the playoffs.
On the defensive side, what is your preferred plan of choice for Myles Garrett? Or
Myles
sorry,
Garrett?
I'm sorry, for
Oh,
Micah
like,
Parsons. For Micah Parsons.
I mean, if you can sign him, then that would be really good. I don't know if financially they have the money for him, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him being in the contract year and everything. I think the cap might help them out a little bit. I could see them doing some kind of long-term deal with
Mm.
him. Lining him up at defensive edge was always an interesting choice to me because he's a little undersized there. And
Mm.
you're starting to see that now when he gets the double teams. Before, when he had a couple of really good linemen around him and stuff, it helped because they were focusing on them. But now when this whole defense, especially on the front end, relies on Micah Parsons. If you double, triple team him up, it's a lot harder for this team to find any success in that back end there.
I always wonder if the defensive end versus outside linebacker alignment for him is less about this year and more about franchise tagging him. I cannot separate that in my mind because we all know the Dallas Cowboys are unafraid of using the franchise tag. It's obviously been a while since they used it on Zeke, and I think that the way players have been instructed by their representation about the franchise tag has fundamentally changed over the last half decade. So I don't know that it's a super great analogy these days, but I cannot help but separate the fact that a defensive end gets less money via the tag than an outside linebacker. And if you want to have that argument about Micah Parsons, like you may as well have the cheapest argument possible. I don't know. Do you foresee that at all being the path Dallas takes?
I couldn't imagine. I mean, I think if they were going to franchise tag him, they would keep him on the defensive end because that's just kind of where they've had him. I can't imagine. I think they'll fight to try and get him to that outside linebacker franchise tag, but Dallas is, they like to go cheap when they can. And if they can buy themselves a year with Micah Parsons, they're going to do whatever they can to do it and hope that the cap gets big enough where they can afford him at that point.
Yeah. That sounds like all about right to me. Let's leave it there. Also, I will say by the way, I did get to go to that lovely playoff game that you all hosted back in January. I had a great time. As every Packers fan who has ever walked in that building has had. I also had a great time.
They're the one team that I don't like. They just don't have a home field advantage. It doesn't exist.
I don't know. I don't know why. It's weird. I mean, it's just so enclosed, but it's not like it doesn't get loud in there. I think it is well built to make it get loud inside when you're on the other side of the ball. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, I think the Packers just found their way. I don't know. You guys have had our number for quite a few years now, and it's part of my disdain towards Green Bay. But it's weird when you're in a market that being in Madison, it's like you have to kind of root for Green Bay, but I just can't get past the fact that they just like. I'll be honest, you guys own us. You guys own us a little bit with these quarterbacks and the history and stuff. And they need to turn it around because I am sick and tired of hearing every single Packers fan in Madison, Wisconsin telling me that. Even though I know it's true, I don't like the truth.
I think it is karmic justice for the early to mid 90s when the Cowboys absolutely had the Packers number. And then when the Packers finally broke through and won a Super Bowl, the Packers didn't get to go through the Cowboys to do it. So I think in return now the Packers are just gonna continue pummeling the Cowboys for however long is the only obviously vibes karmic justice theory that I can come to. Let's talk about modern football though, and our bringing home the bacon award for this week is going to Kirk Cousins. This game on last week's Thursday Night Football, bringing it all the way back there when Kirk Cousins had a very un-Kirk Cousins-esque performance in prime time, passing for well over 500 yards, passing for 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, was 42 of 58 on the night. He dealt. He delivered 4 separate 70-yard touchdown drives, including the overtime winner. He got picked off deep in his own end in the end of the fourth quarter, but his defense bailed him out with 3 and out, and Tampa Bay did the scared 22-yard net punt. Good for Tampa Bay to ultimately lose that one. Krissy, any thoughts, any compliments to give Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons?
I just love his embrace to this new Kirk Cousins persona that he's built over the last few years with the chains and the waking up dripping and the you like that. they love him in Atlanta. I've
Mhm.
seen the videos in the locker room, and he has fully embraced it. He does not seem like, I thought Minnesota was a great landing spot for him. He seems like he would thrive in Minnesota. And
Mhm.
he's gone into Atlanta and he is just having a ball. So I'm just happy for him. In the same way I'm happy for Baker Mayfield too. I mean, that
Yeah.
was an incredible game last Thursday.
Yeah, a great time, and Baker, another guy who seems to just be fitting in his new spot very well. Let's move forward and look ahead at this upcoming week, and to make our pigskin primetime picks. As readers know, last week, readers know. You don't read this. This is a show. As listeners, watchers know. Um, I'm all tripped up. Last week I did not have our updated numbers, but now I do. I trailing Noah, being off the margin of victory by 11.8 points per game. A couple of big blowouts there in Buffalo Bills games are certainly not helping me. Noah at off 11.5 points per game, but Sam Jamini, who picked the Cowboys to beat the Giants by 25 earlier this year, is all the way back in our one guest host this week at 19 points per game. He is off on the margin of victory. Krissy, do you think you can do better than being off by 19 points per game in your few picks this week?
I feel like the bar is pretty low there, so I think I have a good shot. No offense, Sam, but my
He,
goodness,
he he was
25?
perfect. He was perfect straight up picking the games. He was perfect on the money line. So let's start with our Thursday night football game. That is the San Francisco 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks. This is a battle for first place in the NFC West. The Seahawks sitting at 3-2, the 49ers at 2-3. Yes, America, the San Francisco 49ers are below 500, 5 games into the season. Noah, by the way, has picked this game, and he has the San Francisco 49ers winning by 3. Krissy, what are your thoughts on this game on Thursday Night Football?
I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, I don't know if Noah's told you about the Avengers. That's what he calls San Francisco.
Yes, of course.
It's just that like they have so many good pieces, and they'll eventually put it together, and they'll make a long run deep in the playoffs. But Seattle could be a little frisky, and especially being at Seattle could be an interesting matchup. I think San Francisco runs away with this victory. I probably will give it like 6 points. I think that they'll win. I think it'll be a little bit closer, though. It won't be a complete blowout, but I'll give them 6 points.
I took San Francisco by 4 in this one. Geno Smith leads the league in passing yards. But Brock Purdy leads the league in pass yards per attempt. So a real quarterback duel here for sickos in Geno Smith and Brock Purdy. One thing that has been weird is that both of these teams had some real special teams miscues lately. The 49ers are one of the worst teams in special teams DVOA, and they lost to the Rams by allowing a fake punt to convert for a first down. They missed a game-sealing 50-yard field goal, and they allowed a 50-yard punt return to the Rams just to get them in field goal range to do it. But last week, the Seahawks had a potential game-tying field goal against the Giants blocked in the final minute and returned for a touchdown. So two really, really, really just weird teams. And I think the 49ers are better than their record suggests, have just had some weird luck. I think they find a way to get it done. And what did I say? That Noah has them by 3. I have them by 4 is where my number is at. Then let's go ahead to the game in London, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Chicago Bears. As we chronicled earlier in the show, I have no idea what's going on in Jacksonville. Very weird time. Krissy, how do you look at this game in London? Are you one of these types that wakes up on Sunday morning and you're like, yeah, I want to get up and watch this football game, put on the coffee. I stayed up all night watching Mountain West After Dark, but now I want to watch even more football.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not waking up early, especially for a game like this. But the London slate's always a very interesting set of games. I caught like maybe the fourth quarter of the Jets game
Mhm.
last week, but yeah, no, you're not. Especially this game, you're not getting me up early to watch it. I think the Bears win. I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville. I think that they're just too damaged to figure it out. I think it'll be close though. I'll have Chicago by 3. It's gonna be
Okay.
low scoring though.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised there. All right, here is my tidbit from earlier that I want to come to now. These London games are always weird. It is hard to figure out what team is going to adjust well. I wanted to see, because the Jaguars play there so often, if they have an edge, have some kind of preparation edge. They do not. They are 6-5. However, when I went digging a little bit deeper, Krissy, there is one rookie quarterback ever to win a game in London. Can you tell me who it is?
Mitch Trubisky?
It is Trevor Lawrence is the only quarterback to ever win, or is the only rookie quarterback to ever win a game in London. Rookie quarterbacks are otherwise 0-5. And the next 2 weeks, the Jaguars face rookie quarterbacks in London, in Caleb Williams and Drake May next week, from the New England Patriots. So Jacksonville has the worst defense in the league, and I do not care. I am taking them by 7, because this is just weird travel. It's not even like we have quarterbacks from the new Big Ten who are going to play between Oregon and Rutgers, right? Like, not quarterbacks who are used to this transcontinental travel at all. So I'm going to take the Bears, or I'm sorry, I'm going to take the Jaguars by 7 in this one. Maybe 2 vibes based, but I'm trying to find some kind of edge in these weird games.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I'm curious, did Noah pick this one or no?
Noah did. He took the Bears by a touchdown.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Then we move ahead to Sunday Night Football. The Bengals play at the New York Giants. If you are just scoreboard watching last week, it really looks like Daniel Jones had a little bit of a game. Giants put up 29 points. But of those 29 points scored, 3 of them were field goals. So there's 9. And there was 1 touchdown returned off the block field goal that I mentioned earlier that happened to the Seattle Seahawks. So there is 15 of the 29 points. And on the 2-point conversion, the Giants tried to run it up the gut and failed. So 15 of the 29 points. The 2 others are touchdown passes by Daniel Jones, but just not great. I think really Bengals fans have to be hoping for a performance in which their quarterback just doesn't totally black out against them. They've had to play Patrick Mahomes. They had to play Jaden Daniels, who played excellent. They just got off of playing Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to go with the Bengals by 4 here and see if they can bounce back a little bit.
I think this is going to be a good bounce back game for Cincinnati. I told you, once October comes around, this team seems to figure it out. And New York is a little banged up going into this game. I know Thibodeau is out. I think he had something in the arm or the wrist. I saw this morning. I can check up and get that one confirmed, but I know he's out. I think Malik Neighbors is questionable. I think one of the running backs is questionable too. So this is a banged up team that already is pretty low on the totem pole. I'm going to give Cincinnati by 10. I think that they're just going to go in and they're going to womp up on New York.
Kayvon Thibodeau had wrist surgery and is week to week. Whatever that means. I do not think I've seen that he is confirmed out for this game. But I guess we will have to wait and see.
There you go.
Our last game of the week, it is the AFC East primetime matchup in the Buffalo Bills and New York Jets. Probably a just banger of a week for your colleagues at SNY awaiting this Monday night football match.
Hey, they're focused on the Mets right now. It's all about the Grimace Mets.
Yes, it's not just about the money, Spider-Man. It's about the Mets, baby. Real deep TikTok reference there. Krissy, can the New York Jets shake off the bad vibes and defeat the Buffalo Bills this week?
No. I'm just gonna give it to you simply no. I think the defense is still gonna play really well. Offense, you got 1 week to figure it out, and I know they said they might be changing, offensive play calling a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, it's all gonna depend on how Josh Allen does, and I feel pretty confident about this Buffalo Bills team this year. I know somebody on my family side is going to be very excited about that because he's a big Buffalo Bills fan. I have them winning. I think it'll be by a field goal as well. It'll be close because it's a divisional game. Those always get a little weird, but I think that Buffalo is a good team, and I think a lot of people have been doubting on them this season, and they're going to prove them wrong.
Noah took the Bills by 13. I am going to take them by the full 2 touchdowns by 14. Yeah, I have no faith in the New York Jets to come off the mat here. They have done nothing but surprise me for the worse all year. I am going to continue to assume that's what they are going to do. I've picked the Jets once this season. I picked against them once, and I lost in those picks both times. I had it wrong both ways. So whether I pick pro Jets or anti Jets, I end up losing. Look, Josh Allen had a really rough week last week against the Texans. He was 9 for 30 passing.
Yes.
And on a week where it feels like both teams just kind of need to flush the last and move ahead, I have way more faith in the Buffalo Bills being able to flush the previous week and move ahead than I do in whatever is rotting in the New York Jets locker room in MetLife. Not to mention, they are just coming off of the week at London. And I don't understand why the Jets are choosing to play this week. Because when you play in London, the league lets you choose to have your bye week the following week. The Packers, when they last went to London and lost to the New York Giants, chose not to have that following bye week and were all out of sorts forever afterwards. And yeah, the London game is where Aaron Rodgers broke his thumb, and so you can't really tease those two things out of each other very well. But like, I don't understand why the Jets don't want that bye week. Then, especially Aaron Rodgers having the experience that he has doing it, you would imagine that he would kind of remember that and put that together. But no, in terms of which team I think can bounce back better, I am going to take the Bills and the Bills to do it big. Krissy, anything from this upcoming week in football that you are looking forward to that we have not mentioned yet on the show?
We talking NFL or are we talking college?
Oh, we can talk college football. The Noah's not here. No one's here to babysit us. Let's do it.
Perfect. Let's talk about this Rutgers game for a minute. I am so excited. This is my home market team against my school market team, so I'm going to root for the Badgers, but I love what's going on in Piscataway right now. I love how backwards the Big Ten is in football right now. Shout out Indiana for being the first bowl eligible team this season. I
The
mean, the
9
NFL's been
Indiana
great.
dream is alive.
Yeah. Hey, NFL's been great this season, but you can't beat what's going on in college right now.
No, you absolutely cannot. I am so excited to watch Ohio State, Oregon this weekend. I think that game is going to be an absolute banger. And we'll continue testing the theory of how good teams are from the Big Ten traveling 2 time zones to play. And they're 2-9 so far this year, whatever that number is. And so if Ohio State loses, either way, I come out ahead, because if Ohio State loses, then I'll say, oh, okay, Oregon has to travel 2 time zones to come play Wisconsin later this year. And so that means that Oregon's going to lose that game. If Ohio State wins and Oregon loses, I'll get to say, see, Oregon's not that good. Wisconsin can win that game. Either
Win-win.
way, it's great for the narrative. No, this game against Rutgers should be really fascinating. Kyle Monangai is awesome. I would love to see him play on whatever team that I enjoy watching. As long as we do not get a repeat of 2022 rivalry weekend, Ethan Kaliakmanis, I think the Badgers probably keep him in check, because aside from that one 300-yard performance on like a moment's notice start to get Jim Leonard fired, that's me saying that in jest. I understand Luke Fickell was the pick before that. We've not seen Ethan Kaliakmanis do much of anything, but yeah, really exciting football team in Piscataway. And from talking with my pal Aaron Brightman with the Scarlet Faithful earlier today, they're everyone there is really optimistic. I asked if he thought this was like a pivot point to make sure that they get to a bowl game. They're like, no, we think this is a really important game if we're going to get to like 9 or 10 wins. I'm like, all right, let's go 10-win Rutgers. I am on board.
Hey, when Rutgers is good, it's good for football. Although I am rooting for the Badgers just because we need to show them who's boss here. But I'm not too worried about this game. But I think Rutgers will have a pretty good season the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think so too. Should be interesting. I think it's clearly just like a coin flip game. Would love to find out. I think it's going to be two teams that really want to figure out how to run the ball against the other, and so should be a lot of fun. All right, Krissy, thank you so much for joining the show this week. I know we got to get you out of here. Is there anything you would like to say to the people before we sign off?
Nope, I didn't put my social medias on here, but you can find me at Krissy Birdsall everywhere. And looking forward to seeing how the rest of the NFL season goes on. And yeah, subscribe to Snap the Pigskin.
Thanks so much, Krissy. We will make sure to link her socials in the show's description. I've been your host, Kedrick Stumbris. I cover the Wisconsin Badgers for Athlon Sports. You can find me on the website, formerly known as Twitter, at Kedrick Stumbris. For Krissy Birdsall, this has been Snap the Pigskin, which you can watch on YouTube, youtube.com/@snapthepigskin, or listen wherever your ears get tickled by podcasts. Until we talk to you all again next week, go Pack Go.